All right, so I'm sure many of you have wondered what this part of the main method means. And I know I told you at the very beginning of the course that at some point we would see what this actually means and what it's used for. And today is that day. How many of you have ever used the DOS or command prompt for your machine? Now, I am on a Macintosh. I'm not on a PC. So what you're going to see is the PC's version or the Mac's version of the command prompt. For those of you who have used DOS before, you may have typed it into command. Like in DOS, it would be dir to get a directory, and there are a number of options on it. You can do a /p or a /m, or there's a couple of other options in Linux or Unix-based systems. We have the ls command, which is called the list command. And as you see, I have given it some additional information. After I've typed in the command, I have provided it with, in this case, a -l. I could have done a lot of different things. Why do I bring this up? I bring this up because I want to make you aware of something. I want to make you aware of this idea that we can provide command line parameters when we execute a program. Every language deals with command line parameters a little bit differently. .NET has its own way of handling things. Java has its own way of handling things. C# or C++ has its own way. Even C has its own form or fashion for dealing with these things. When we're dealing with Java applications, what happens is those arguments are converted into an array of strings and provided to the application being run as an argument to the main method. That means inside the main method, we can reference this variable name and access that array of string data. Now, what we need to understand is that when we're dealing with a development environment, we're not running things from a command prompt. So we have to go into the configuration, as you saw in the directions, and provide those arguments. So what happens is the command is generated to call the ArrayProgram2 application, and it is provided with these arguments. Now, you're probably wondering, how does Java figure out how to lay these out in the array? It separates the strings based on white space. So it works on the first continuous set of characters until it sees white space, and that goes in the first part of the array, the first index of the array. And then this goes in the second spot, and the third spot, and the fourth spot. And as you can see, when we write out the list, we separate it by commas. When it comes in from the command prompt or the terminal window, it comes in separated by spaces. If we run this application, and I'm going to try to see here if we can see the console debugger, if we can see what... I'm trying to see if I can find a view here that we can open that will allow us to see no, it's not going to let us. I don't think there's a view that will let us see what that would look like if we were to call it ourselves. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's anything here where I can show you what it would look like if we were to call it ourselves. Sometimes we can see that, and sometimes we can't. But what we would see is the Java command to run the program, followed by the Java command to followed by the name of the program, followed by the arguments that we would be providing to make the program run and provide it the data that we want. What we have done then is altered this program to allow us to take that data in and convert it to an integer. And essentially what we're doing here is what we call an array copy. We're taking the items from one array and putting them in a different one. Now we are doing one extra step right here, which is converting that from a string to an integer so that we can do all the, so we can do all the things that we want to do with it. Because remember, this is coming in as a string. We can't add and subtract, multiply and divide strings. We can only do that with numbers. So we have to switch it over. I'm only going to take a look at the things that have changed. I'm not going to go through the whole loop process again and how we take those numbers and how we take those numbers and we add them all together and we figure out which one's largest and which one's smallest. Instead, I want to show you how we get that data in, what that data coming in looks like, and how we convert that data into a string. So the first thing that we do is we create a new array that's the same size as the array of arguments. Now, how do we get the array of arguments, the size of the array of the arguments? Well, luckily we have that length property because we don't know when someone runs a program how many items they're going to put in at the end of as a command line parameter. We have no way to tell that. We have no way to limit that. So instead of trying to tell or limit that, we can actually ask that information. There's a public property that contains it. So I'm going to create an array of integers called scores that's exactly the same size as the number of items that were entered as a command line argument. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the beginning of that command line argument array. And since the arrays are the same size, they're going to have the same number of indices. Their indices are going to start at 0 and go up to 1 minus the size. The size in this case happens to be 10. And I can see that just because I'm looking right down here and I see that it's a length of 10. So they all have 0 to 9. All the indexes are the same. So I can take the value at the index in the argument array and put it in the same location in the integer array. Now, there is one little step I have to do, and that is convert it to an integer. So I'm going to do this essentially 10 times. And what we're going to do is we're slowly going to see scores start to have values. Notice that everything is 0. But slowly but surely, we're going to fill up each item of the array with a value. In this case, it's going to come from a different array, but eventually we're going to get there. Now, I'm going to run this one more time so we can see. I'm going to run this one more time. I'm going to put a breakpoint here. I'm going to take these two out. And what I want you to do is I want you to look at, I'm going to move this up, and I want you to look at the end result. Because what we are doing in this for loop is we're looking at the first item in the args array, in the array called args, 100. We're passing that through integer.parseInt, and we're putting it in index 0 on scores. So the order of the items is the same: 100, 90, 95, 80, 75, 60, 65, 79, 50, and 40. All right. Now, notice that we don't have to make a change. The other thing I want you to see is notice that we didn't make any changes. When we created this program, we copied the exact same program, and we only made changes at the top. Notice this for loop has not changed. It hasn't changed because we're using scores.length. Because scores.length will tell us however many items are in scores, it doesn't matter if scores has 5 items or 10 items, this loop is still going to work because it's going to move. We're going to go through it as many times as we need to because we're asking the computer dynamically, what is length now? Now that we're running this program, what is length? And we can change that at any time. This is a very interesting way to get data in. And some people will choose to use this for their homework and some people won't. What I want you to do for your homework, though, is use the technique to load data into the array that we're going to use in exercise 3. And what really, to me, makes arrays so useful is the fact that you can base it on user-provided data that the end user provides to your program. It makes it very, very helpful. So you've seen everything that we're doing in exercise 2 and ArrayProgram2. What I'd like you to do now is go ahead and follow the instructions to create ArrayProgram3. And take a look, and then when you're finished, you can watch the video, and we'll see what changes we've made there and how that changes the program. Again, if you have any questions on this, please feel free to email me at bsimbeck@ccac.edu. Thank you.